looking at a period which probably lasted for a very short while, the pre-Raphaelite age. It was founded in 1848 as a group by people like Holman Hunt, D.G. Rosetti, Thomas Woolner, etc. Why is it so important for us when we are looking at English poetry? Because they believed that it was important to detail the difficult, different parts of nature. So they would talk about the number of petals, for example. They published a journal called The Germ, and they were also associated with John Ruskin, you remember? The great Victorian critic and essayist. Now, this particular group imitated nature because they wanted to spread the idea of what they called the pre-Raphaelite movement. Please remember, Raphael was a great artist, painter. So they held exhibitions on nature and they wrote a lot of romantic poetry. Christina Rosetti, 1830 to 1894. Her brother, D.G. Rosetti, was probably a better known poet, but that doesn't in any way reduce the importance of Christina Rosetti. Her poems, we notice, are abundantly rich in detail. She was interested in writing about mortality, about spiritual existence. Some of her famous poems were published in the Athenaeum. Maud Clare, On Thwarted Love, and Bird Raptures are some of her favorite works. Can you imagine? Some of them have been converted into nursery rhymes and some of them used as choir songs. What a variety we have here. Remember by Christina Rosetti is a sonnet. Another sonnet, you might ask? Yes, very popular with many poets down the ages. So let me read this 14-lined poem to you. Remember me when I'm gone away, gone far away into the silent land, when you can no more hold me by the hand, nor I half turn to go yet turning stay. Remember me when no more day by day you tell me of our future that you planned. Only remember me, you understand? It'll be late to counsel then or pray. Yet, if you should forget me for a while and afterwards remember, do not grieve. For if the darkness and corruption leave a vestige of the thoughts that once I had, better by far you should forget and smile than that you should remember and be sad. Did you realize that this is a different kind of a poem? Most of our poems, when we talk about somebody who's dead and gone, is from the point of view of those who are mourning, those who are left behind on this earth. But did you notice this poem is written from the point of view of that dead person, the one we are mourning. So up there in heaven, probably she's looking down at her lover and she says, remember me when I'm gone away, gone far away into the silent land, right, from which no man returns. And then, what are you going to miss when you can no more hold me by the hand? Because I'm up there and you are down here. And then she talks about how every time we parted, I would stop again, turn, and not immediately leave. Remember me by day, she says, and remember how we planned the future. Yes, that future which we are not going to have. Just remember me, because now we cannot pray together, we cannot talk together. And then there is something very interesting. Even if you do forget me for a while, she says, and afterwards remember, do not grieve. Probably there are some people who feel guilty about the fact that they are not thinking about the departed. So she's telling her lover, don't worry, if for some time you forget me, because I know you're going to remember me again. So if you afterwards remember me, do not grieve. And then, for if the darkness and corruption leave a vestige of the thoughts that once I had. There is so much of shared memory between you and me, she says. So even if there is just a trace, a vestige means a trace, even that will do for me. But I think the couplet is the most beautiful part of this poem, where she says, better by far you should forget and smile than that you should remember and be sad. I've left you, I've gone away, but I want you to be happy. And if it is in forgetting me that you get joy, even that is acceptable to me. So listen to that beautiful couplet. I think probably an expression of true love that she had for her lover. Better by far you should forget and smile than that you should remember and be sad. This sonnet of 14 lines, as all sonnets are, is in the Shakespearean style. 3 quatrains followed by a couplet. And if you remember our very first poem, we talked about how the couplet changes the entire meaning that the poet has been talking about so far. Remember, sonnet number 130. Now let's look at some of the figures of speech. Let me begin with some that are not so common. And one that we have here is litote, L-I-T-O-T-E. It actually means understatement. It's the opposite of the hyperbole. Have you heard of the hyperbole? Where there is exaggeration. So what am I saying here? The word depth is not used at all. And instead, the poet says, when I am gone away, right? Gone far away into the silent land. The word really, the meaning is depth, but she does not use it. There is something called anaphora. Anaphora is the repetition of the same word in lines. For example, remember me when I'm gone away. Remember me when no more day by day, right? So you have anaphora. Not very common. But it's always interesting to look at also the not so common figures of speech. Isn't that how we learn to appreciate poetry more? When we learn something more, we appreciate it even much more. I'm not going to tell you about the metaphor. I'm not going to talk to you about the imagery. Look for them, find them, and you'll enjoy it when you find them. The entire tone of the poem is also something that we must look at. It's not a direct figure of speech, but it is important. It's a kind of a conciliatory, it's okay. It's that kind of a tone that you find all through the poem. And therefore, begin with even the apostrophe probably, which is a direct address. And let me tell you something very interesting. Our poet, Christina Rosetti, was only 19 when she wrote this poem. What depth of feeling, what beauty of imagery she's able to create here. We talked about pre-Raphaelite poetry. So maybe you could go back and read some of the pre-Raphaelite poets. Of course, I already mentioned Christina Rosetti's brother, Dante Gabriel Rossetti. And he has a poem called The Blessed Damozel. Do read that. That is also from the point of view of the dead. And of course, love poems. One of my favorites is How Do I Love Thee? Let Me Count the Ways by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Happy reading.